My father-in-law looked me dead in the eye, clinked his wine glass, and smiled warmly. Then, without breaking eye contact, he turned to his Japanese client and called me a useless parasite in fluent Japanese. He thought I was just a broke, dumb husband who got lucky marrying his daughter. He thought my silence was stupidity. He had no idea that I spent 5 years living in Tokyo before I ever met his daughter. I was going to let it slide for the sake of peace, until the conversation shifted. What he said next wasn't just an insult. It was a confession involving my wife that froze the blood in my veins. Welcome back to Inspiration Seeker. If you've ever been underestimated or betrayed by the people closest to you, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and tell me in the comments, what's the best way you've ever dealt with toxic in-law? You're not going to believe how this dinner ended. To understand why that dinner was so explosive, you have to understand who I was to them, or rather, who they thought I was. My name is Jack. For the last 3 years, I've been living as a ghost in my own marriage. On paper, I'm a freelance software engineer. To my wife, Emily, and her father, Arthur, I'm basically unemployed. I work from home. I dress in simple t-shirts and jeans, and I don't drive a flashy car. What they don't know, because they never bother to ask, is that I'm a high-level security consultant for some of the biggest tech firms in the world. I make good money, really good money, but I save it. I'm building capital for my own startup, a dream I've had since college. I never felt the need to flash a Rolex just to prove I'm a man. But in New York City, specifically in the circle my father-in-law runs in, if you aren't wearing a suit that costs more than a Honda Civic, you don't exist. Arthur is the CEO of a massive real estate firm in Manhattan. He's the kind of guy who thinks net worth equals human worth. From the moment Emily introduced me to him, he looked at me like I was a stain on his expensive carpet. He made it clear that I wasn't husband material for his princess. The saddest part wasn't Arthur's arrogance. It was watching Emily slowly morph into him. When we first met, Emily was sweet, grounded, and ambitious in a genuine way. But over the last year, something changed. She started caring more about galas, designer bags, and what her friends thought of us. She stopped asking about my day. She stopped looking at me with love and started looking at me with disappointment. I became an accessory that didn't match her outfit anymore. It all came to a head on a Tuesday afternoon. I was coding in my home office when Emily barged in, looking frantic. She didn't even say hello. She just tossed a suit bag onto the couch and said, "Put this on. Dad is demanding we come to dinner tonight at Le Bernardin. He has a massive client from Tokyo, and he needs us to play the part of the happy all-American family. So please, Jack, for once, just try not to embarrass me." I looked at the garment bag on the couch, then back at my wife. "Embarrass you?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "I've never embarrassed you, Emily. I just don't fake laugh at your father's insults." Emily let out a frustrated sigh, running a hand through her perfectly styled hair. "This isn't about his jokes, Jack. This is about the optics. This client, Mr. Tanaka, represents a gateway into the Asian market for Dad's firm. He's incredibly traditional. He values lineage stability and family harmony above profit margins. If Dad shows up alone, he looks like a corporate shark. If he shows up with a devoted daughter and a loyal son-in-law, he looks trustworthy. He looks like a patriarch." I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. "So I'm a prop. I'm a piece of furniture to make the room look nicer. Just put on the suit, Jack," she snapped, checking her phone for the 3rd time in a minute. "Please, do it for me. For her." That was the phrase that had kept me in this marriage for so long. I grabbed the suit and went to the bedroom. As I dressed, I looked at myself in the mirror. The suit was a dark charcoal, sharp and tailored. I looked the part of a successful man, even if my bank account was a secret to the people waiting for me downstairs. We met Arthur in the lobby of his Upper East Side penthouse. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't even say hello. He just scanned me from head to toe, frowned at my shoes, and then turned his attention to Emily. "Good." He cleaned up, Arthur grunted, as if discussing a stray dog they were allowing inside. He took a step closer to me, invading my personal space. "Now listen closely. Tonight is high stakes. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't offer opinions on a market, politics, or the wine. You smile, you nod, and you act like a grateful husband who is lucky to be at the table. Mr. Tanaka doesn't speak much English, so just sit there and try not to look confused. I understand, I said, biting back the urge to correct him. I'm just there for the scenery. Arthur sneered, adjusting his silk tie. Exactly. At least you know your place. If you ruin this merger with your freelancer awkwardness, you won't just be sleeping on the couch. You'll be sleeping on the street. He turned on his heel and marched toward his waiting limousine. I followed behind with Emily, who didn't defend me. She didn't even squeeze my hand. She just walked briskly to keep up with her father. As I climbed into the back of that silent, cold limousine, I decided to stick to the plan. I would be the mute, simple husband. I wouldn't tell them that I spent 5 years in Tokyo. I wouldn't mention that I spoke Japanese fluently or that I understood the intricate nuances of their business culture better than Arthur ever could. I would let them underestimate me. I just didn't realize that by the end of the night, my silence would be the loudest weapon in the room. The interior of Le Bernardin was exactly what you'd expect. Hushed, immaculate, and smelling faintly of sea salt and old money. The lighting was dim, designed to make diamonds sparkle and secrets stay hidden. As we were led to a prime corner table, I could feel the eyes of the other patrons on us. Or rather, on Arthur and Emily. They walked with that specific Manhattan stride, shoulders back, chin up, owning the space. I walked a few steps behind, the shadow in their spotlight. We sat down, and the dynamic was established immediately. Arthur took the head of the table, facing the entrance so he could command the room. Emily sat to his right. I was placed on his left, effectively making me the buffer between the power players and the wall. For the first 20 minutes, I might as well have been a ghost. Arthur and Emily launched into a rapid-fire conversation about Hampton summer rentals and the fluctuating price of beachfront property. They didn't even look at me. At one point, the waiter came to pour water. I took a sip and decided to test the waters. The architecture in here is incredible, I said, looking up at the wooden ceiling beams. It reminds me of a place I've visited in. Jack, please, Arthur interrupted, not even glancing away from his menu. We are trying to discuss serious matters before Mr. Tanaka arrives. Don't fill the air with idle chatter about the ceiling. Emily didn't defend me. In fact, she didn't even hear me. She was completely engrossed in her phone. She held it slightly under the table, angling the screen away from me. I watched her thumbs flying across the glass, a soft, secretive smile playing on her lips. It wasn't the stressed frown of a work email. It was the giddy expression of a teenager with a crush. "Who are you texting?" I asked quietly. She jumped slightly, flipping the phone face down on the white tablecloth. "Work," she said, her voice sharp and defensive. "Just finalizing some details for a listing. Why are you so nosy?" "I'm not being nosy. We're at dinner. I thought we were here to present a united front." "We are," Arthur snapped. "And the best way you can help is by drinking your water and looking presentable. Mr. Tanaka is extremely perceptible. If he senses weakness or distraction, he will walk away." The irony was suffocating. Arthur was worried about me being a distraction, while his daughter was clearly mentally absent, engaged in a digital conversation she refused to share with her husband. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands. I decided right then that if they wanted me to be an observer, I would be the best observer they had ever seen. I started paying attention to every detail. Every twitch in Emily's eye, every vibration of her phone, and every arrogant smirk on Arthur's face. Then the mood shifted. Arthur straightened his tie and stood up. "He's here. Stand up, Jack. And for God's sake, don't bow. You'll do it wrong and look ridiculous. Just shake his hand." Mr. Tanaka didn't just walk into the room. He glided. He was an older man, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair swept back perfectly in a bespoke navy suit that fit him like armor. While Arthur projected power through volume and aggression, Mr. Tanaka projected it through absolute silence. He carried an aura of old-world discipline, the kind that made the air around him feel heavier. Arthur practically tripped over himself trying to get around the table to greet him. It was embarrassing to watch. My father-in-law, the king of Manhattan real estate. Looked like a desperate junior associate trying to impress the boss. Mr. Tanaka. An honor, truly an honor, Arthur boomed, extending a hand. Tanaka took it, his grip firm but brief, his expression unreadable. He offered a slight, respectful bow, not a full bow, but enough to show courtesy. Mr. Arthur, Tanaka said, his voice deep and raspy. Thank you for the invitation. His English was heavily accented, slow, and deliberate. You could tell he was comfortable with the language, but it wasn't his preferred sword to fight with. Arthur gestured grandly toward us. Please meet my family. This is my daughter, Emily, the VP of Operations. Emily flashed her brightest, most practiced smile and gave a polite nod. Tanaka's eyes lingered on her for a second, polite but assessing. Then Arthur waved a dismissive hand in my direction. And this is Jack, my son-in-law. He said the title like it was a medical condition he was apologizing for. I stood up and offered my hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. Tanaka looked me in the eye. For a split second, I saw something flicker in his gaze. Curiosity, maybe? Or perhaps he just sensed that I didn't fit the mold of this table. He shook my hand silently and sat down. Once we were seated, Arthur leaned in, his face taking on a conspiratorial look. He switched gears immediately. He looked at Tanaka and smiled. But this time, the words coming out of his mouth weren't English. Tanaka-san, Arthur began, his Japanese surprisingly competent though thick, with an American accent. Please, let us speak in your language. It will be much more comfortable for you, and we can discuss the finer details without barriers. Tanaka looked at me, then back at Arthur. He replied in Japanese. Are you sure? Will your family not feel excluded? Arthur laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. He looked right at me, grinning as if he were telling a joke I wasn't on. But he spoke in Japanese. Oh, don't worry about him. He's simple. He wouldn't understand a word, even if you spoke slowly. He's just here to fill the seat. We can say whatever we want. I felt a sharp spike of adrenaline hit my chest. My heart hammered against my ribs. I kept my face perfectly neutral, freezing a polite, vacuous smile on my lips. Arthur had just handed me the key to his own destruction, and he didn't even know it. There is a specific kind of power in knowing a secret that could destroy the person sitting across from you. As Arthur switched effortlessly into Japanese, the dynamic at the table shifted completely. To the waiters and the other patrons, it looked like a sophisticated international business meeting. To me, it was a live performance of my own humiliation. Arthur leaned back, swirling his red wine, and gestured toward me with his glass. He wore a benevolent, fatherly smile, the kind you'd see in a campaign ad, but the words leaving his mouth were venomous. He looks quite dull, doesn't he? Arthur said in Japanese, his tone casual, as if commenting on the weather. My daughter has a weakness for strays. This one, he brings nothing to the table. No money, no connections, no ambition. He is basically a parasite living in the house I paid for. I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten, but I forced myself to pick up my fork. I sliced into my appetizer, a delicate tuna tartare, with surgical precision. I chewed slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on my plate. Playing the part of the oblivious, uncultured American husband, Mr. Tanaka didn't laugh. He glanced at me, his dark eyes searching for any sign of comprehension. He is her husband, Arthur-san, Tanaka replied, his Japanese formal and slightly rebuking. In my culture, we do not speak of family this way. Does he work? Arthur scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. He plays with computers. Freelance nonsense. He thinks he is an engineer, but he is just a glorified repairman. I keep him around because he is harmless, like a golden retriever, but with less personality. That one stung. A dog. I took a sip of water to wash down the bile rising in my throat. It took every ounce of discipline I had learned during my years in the dojo in Kyoto to not slam my fist on the table. I had to remind myself, wait, let him dig the hole deeper. Emily, meanwhile, was completely checked out. She heard her father speaking a foreign language and took it as her cue to return to her phone. She was texting under the table again. oblivious of the fact that her father was stripping away my dignity layer by layer just inches away from her. "It must be a burden for you," Tanaka said quietly, his gaze lingering on me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. "It is," Arthur sighed, acting the martyr. "But we make sacrifices for our children. And speaking of sacrifices, that is why this merger is so important. I need to secure the future, since my son-in-law clearly cannot." I looked up then, meeting Arthur's eyes. He winked at me, a friendly, reassuring wink. He thought he was untouchable. He had no idea that the golden retriever was memorizing every single syllable. The appetizers were cleared away, and the waiter poured a vintage Cabernet. The atmosphere at the table grew heavier, shifting from personal insults to business strategy. I thought the worst was over. I thought Arthur had exhausted his supply of cruelty. I was wrong. He was just warming up. Mr. Tanaka leaned forward, his expression serious. He switched topics to the merger, the reason we were all here. "Arthur-san," he said in Japanese, his voice low, "I have concerns. The market rumor suggests that Sterling Corp is offering a more aggressive bid for the downtown development. Brad Sterling is a ruthless competitor. If he undercuts you, this partnership becomes risky for my firm." I froze. Brad Sterling. The name was infamous in New York tech and real estate circles. He was young, flashy, and known for hostile takeovers. He was also Arthur's sworn enemy. Arthur laughed, a confident, arrogant sound that echoed slightly in the quiet restaurant. He took a long sip of wine, wiped his mouth, and then dropped a bomb that shattered my entire reality. "Do not worry about Brad Sterling," Arthur said in Japanese, glancing sideways at Emily. "He will not be submitting a bid. In fact, by tomorrow morning, he will be withdrawing from the race entirely." Tanaka looked confused. "How can you be so certain? Business is unpredictable." Arthur smirked, gesturing toward Emily, who was just standing up from the table. "Excuse me," Emily said in English, clutching her purse tight. "I need to use the ladies' room. I'll be right back." She smiled at Tanaka, then shot a quick, nervous glance at her father before hurrying away. As soon as she was out of earshot, Arthur leaned in closer to Tanaka. The look in his eyes wasn't just greedy. It was predatory. "My daughter," Arthur said in Japanese, "is a very persuasive woman. She has been cultivating a relationship with Brad Sterling for the past 3 months. Tonight, while we eat, she is sending him the final encouragement he needs. She told him she would leave her loser husband. He pointed a finger at me. If Brad agrees to drop the bid, she is securing our future, Tanaka-san, using the oldest asset in the book, desire." The room seemed to spin. The noise of the restaurant faded into a dull roar. My wife wasn't just cheating on me. She was being pimped out by her own father as a corporate strategy. She wasn't in the bathroom. She was coordinating a corporate sabotage with her lover, using our marriage as a bargaining chip. Arthur looked at me and grinned, raising his glass as if to toast. To him, I was just the ignorant fool sitting in the splash zone of his genius. He didn't know that the fool was about to become the judge, jury, and executioner. 10 minutes later, Emily walked back toward our table. The change in her demeanor was subtle, but to a husband who had spent years memorizing her every mood, it was screamingly obvious. Her cheeks were slightly flushed, her eyes were bright with adrenaline, and she was clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. She didn't look like a woman who had just freshened up her lipstick. She looked like a woman who had just pulled off a heist. As she sat down, she didn't look at me. Her eyes went straight to her father. "Everything good?" Arthur asked in English, his voice casual but his eyes sharp. Emily nodded, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. "All taken care of," she said. "I got the confirmation. It's done." My stomach turned. "What's done?" I asked, try to keep my voice steady. Emily waved a hand dismissively. "Just a work crisis, Jack. You wouldn't understand the details. It's handled now." Arthur leaned back, looking satisfied. He took a sip of his wine, then turned his attention back to Mr. Tanaka. The mask of the loving father slipped back into place. But the words he spoke in Japanese were enough to make me want to flip the table. "You see, Tanaka-san," Arthur said, gesturing proudly at his daughter, That is loyalty. She just confirmed that she has agreed to meet Brad at his hotel later tonight to finalize the withdrawal of his bid. She is a dutiful daughter first and a wife second. Mr. Tanaka didn't nod. He didn't smile. For the first time all evening, his composure seemed to crack. He looked from Arthur to Emily and then to me. His expression wasn't admiration. It was profound distaste. He looked like he had just swallowed something spoiled. Arthur-san, Tanaka said slowly in Japanese, "You're saying you encourage your daughter be unfaithful to her husband for a contract?" Arthur chuckled, completely misreading Tanaka's disgust as impressed shock. "Business is war, my friend. We use every weapon we have. And Emily knows where her bread is buttered. She knows that this 1 inch," he jerked his thumb at me again, "can't provide the life she wants. So she does what is necessary. It's just a transaction." I looked at Emily. She was cutting her steak, completely unaware that her father was describing her as nothing more than corporate currency. She looked beautiful, elegant, and completely hollow. At that moment, the last shred of love I had for her evaporated. I wasn't sitting next to my wife anymore. I was sitting next to a stranger who had sold our marriage for her father's approval and a higher stock price. The betrayal was absolute. But what they didn't know was that the transaction was about to get canceled. They say that when you face a sudden catastrophic shock, your body goes into fight or flight mode. I didn't experience either. I simply froze. It felt like the temperature in the restaurant had dropped 50 degrees. The chatter of the other diners, the clinking of silverware, the soft jazz playing in the background, it all faded into a distant, muffled hum. The only thing I could hear clearly was the blood pounding in my ears, a rhythmic war drum signaling the end of my life as I knew it. I looked at the steak on my plate. Medium rare, perfectly seared. Minutes ago, I was hungry. Now, the thought of swallowing anything made me nauseous. I looked at Emily. She was casually checking her reflection in her spoon, making sure her lipstick was still perfect for her meeting with Brad later. She wasn't just my wife. She was an enemy combatant sitting inside my perimeter. The rage didn't come like a fire. It came like liquid nitrogen. It clarified everything. All the times she came home late, all the times she hit her phone, all the times Arthur treated me like dirt. It wasn't just bad behavior. It was a coordinated campaign. I was the fool they kept around for tax purposes and family photos, a prop to make them look normal while they engaged in moral bankruptcy. Arthur was still talking to Tanaka in Japanese, bragging about how he had trained Emily to prioritize the family legacy over petty sentimentalities like marriage vows. He was laughing, a deep belly laugh that shook his shoulders. He was celebrating the destruction of my dignity. I reached for my wine glass. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer effort it took to not reach across the table and strangle the man sitting opposite me. I gripped the stem of the glass, so hard I thought it might snap. I took a breath, a long, slow inhale through my nose, just like Sensei utilized in the dojo before spar. Control, I told myself. If you explode now, you look like the crazy, jealous husband. You lose. If you want to win, you have to strike with precision. I lifted my eyes and stared directly at Arthur. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. I just locked onto him with a gaze so intense that it actually pierced through his arrogance. He faltered for a second, his laugh dying in his throat as he noticed my expression. He looked confused, like a predator realizing the prey has stopped running. The time for silence was over. Arthur blinked, momentarily unsettled by the intensity of my glare. But his arrogance was a thick shield. He quickly dismissed it. To him, I was probably just sulking about the menu or the lack of attention. He turned back to Mr. Tanaka, raising his glass for a toast, expecting the deal to be sealed. But Mr. Tanaka didn't raise his glass. Instead, he placed his napkin on the table with a slow, deliberate finality. The air around him seemed to harden. He looked at Arthur not as a potential partner, but as something unpleasant he had stepped in. "Arthur-san," Tanaka said in Japanese, his voice cold and cutting, "I believe this dinner is over. I came here to build a bridge between our companies, but I see now that the foundation of your house is rotten. A man who sells his own daughter's virtue for a contract is not a man I can trust with my capital. Tanaka began to push his chair back, ready to stand. Panic flashed across Arthur's face. He hadn't expected the moral high ground to matter this much. He thought money was the universal language. Wait, Tanaka-san. Arthur sputtered in Japanese, leaning over the table, his desperation leaking through. You are misunderstanding. You are being too traditional. This is America. We do what we must to win. My daughter understands this. My son-in-law is irrelevant. He is a non-factor. Why should his feelings stop us from making millions? Emily, sensing the tension but not understanding the words, looked between them nervously. Dad? Is everything okay? What's happening? Quiet, Emily. Arthur snapped in English, not even looking at her. He turned back to Tanaka, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper in Japanese. Please do not be foolish. The deal is good. Who cares about the methods? Who cares about honor when the profit margins are this high? That was it. The line had been crossed, erased, and spat upon. Arthur wasn't just insulting me anymore. He was insulting the very concept of dignity. He was desecrating the culture I had spent years admiring and living in. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. I simply took my heavy silver fork and dropped it onto my porcelain plate. Clang. The sound was sharp and jarring, cutting to the murmurs of the restaurant like a gunshot. Arthur jumped. Emily gasped. Mr. Tanaka froze halfway out of his chair. Every eye at the table snapped to me. I sat back, unbuttoning my suit jacket casually. I looked at Arthur, who was staring at me with a mixture of annoyance and confusion. He opened his mouth to scold me, to tell me to behave, but I didn't let him speak. It was my turn now. I cleared my throat. It was a small sound, but in that vacuum of silence, it sounded like a gavel coming down in a courtroom. I looked at Arthur, who was staring at me with his mouth slightly open, waiting for me to apologize for the noise. Instead, I locked eyes with him. I didn't see the powerful CO anymore. I saw a small, frightened man. I took a breath, letting the familiar cadence of the language I had mastered during my 5 years in Kyoto wash over me. I didn't speak in English. I spoke in Japanese, not the rough, business school Japanese Arthur used, but the high, formal register of Kigo, the language of respect and samurai discipline. Arthur-san, I said softly, my pronunciation flawless. It is profoundly impolite to discuss the price of your own daughter's dignity in front of an honored guest. And it is fatally foolish to assume that just because a man is quiet, he is deaf. The effect was instantaneous. It was as if I had slapped him across the face with a wet towel. Arthur's face went from flushed red to sickly, ghostly white in the span of a second. His eyes bulged. He gripped the edge of the table, so hard his knuckles turned white. He tried to speak, but only a strangled, choking sound came out. I didn't stop there. I kept my gaze steady, my voice calm but laced with steel. You call me a parasite, I continued in Japanese. You call me a dog. You assumed I was stupid because I don't wear a $3,000 suit. But in Japan, Arthur-san, we learned that the loudest man in the room is usually the weakest. You spent this entire evening proving how weak you truly are. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the waiters seemed to stop moving. Emily looked between us, her head whipping back and forth like she was watching a tennis match she didn't understand. She saw her father's terrified expression, and panic set in. Jack? She stammered, her voice trembling. What were you saying? Why is he looking at you like that? You don't speak Japanese. I turned to her slowly. I do, Emily. I lived in Tokyo for 5 years before we met. I was a lead security consultant for the government there. I never told you because you never asked. You were too busy telling me how to dress, how to eat, and how to be the husband your father wanted. I turned back to Arthur, who looked like he was having a cardiac event. You wanted a show, Arthur. You wanted a prop. Well, now you have an audience. And I think Mr. Tanaka is listening very closely. Arthur tried to recover. He really did. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and forced a shaky, desperate laugh, trying to gaslight the entire table. This is ridiculous, he stammered in English. looking at Tanaka. My son-in-law is clearly unwell. He's making things up. He's a failed freelancer with delusions of grandeur. I didn't even look at Arthur. I turned my chair slightly so I was facing Mr. Tanaka directly. The time for family drama was over. This was now a business transaction, and I was about to audit the books. Tanaka-san, I said in Japanese, my voice dropping an octave, becoming a voice I use in boardrooms when I had to tell a CEO his company was compromised. The immorality of this man is the least of your worries. The real danger is his insolvency. Arthur slammed his hand on the table. Shut up. You don't know anything about my business. I ignored him. Last month, I continued to Tanaka, Arthur's company suffered a massive data breach. They didn't report it to the shareholders because it would have tanked the stock. He hired an outside firm to patch the leak quietly. That firm was mine. I didn't take the job because I wanted to help him. I took it because I wanted to see what he was hiding. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, tapped the screen a few times, and slid it across the white tablecloth toward Mr. Tanaka. On the screen was a PDF, a forensic accounting report. While I was inside his servers patching security holes, I took a look at the financials. I explained calmly. The numbers he showed you in the proposal are fabricated. He is leveraging assets he doesn't own. He is technically bankrupt. The only reason he is pushing for this merger so aggressively is because he needs your capital to pay off the debts he owes to private lenders before the fiscal quarter ends. Tanaka picked up my phone. He scrolled through the document, his eyes narrowing behind his glasses. He saw the red ink. He saw the hidden accounts. He saw the lie. And regarding Brad Sterling, I added, delivering the final nail in the coffin, Arthur isn't manipulating the market with strategy. He is using insider trading based on illegal information he coerced his daughter to obtain. If you sign with him, Tanaka-san, you aren't just signing a bad deal. You are signing up for a federal investigation. The SEC is already sniffing around. I know, because I'm the one who sent him the anonymous tip this morning. The color didn't just drain from Arthur's face. It vanished. He looked like a corpse propped up in a suit. He slumped back in his chair, defeated by the useless son-in-law he had spent years mocking. He realized too late that while he was playing checkers, I had been playing 4D chess. Mr. Tanaka placed my phone gently back on the table. He didn't slam it. He didn't throw it. He treated the device with more respect than he had shown Arthur in the last 5 minutes. He took off his glasses, cleaned them slowly with a silk cloth, and put them back on. It was a gesture of finality. He had seen enough. He stood up, smoothing out his suit jacket. Arthur scrambled up too, knocking his chair over in the process. It crashed to the floor with a loud bang, drawing the attention of the entire dining room. Tanaka-san, please. Arthur begged in English, abandoning the Japanese facade entirely. Sweat was pouring down his face now. That report, it's old data. It's out of context. My son-in-law is a hacker, a criminal. You can't trust a word he says. Mr. Tanaka ignored him completely. He turned his body away from Arthur, effectively cutting him out of existence. He looked at me. For the first time all night, there was a genuine warmth in his eyes. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a small metallic case. He extracted a simple, heavy business card and held it out to me with both hands, the highest form of business etiquette in Japan. Jack-san, Tanaka said in English, his voice clear and loud enough for Emily to hear. You are a man of skill, and more importantly, you are a man of honor. It is rare to find both in this city. I stood up and accepted the card with both hands, giving him a deep, respectful bow. Arigato gozaimasu, Tanaka-san. I replied, I am sorry this dinner was a waste of your time. Not a waste, Tanaka said, casting a sideways glance at a trembling Arthur. I saved $50 million tonight, because of you. With that, Mr. Tanaka walked out of the restaurant, leaving Arthur standing in the wreckage of his career. Arthur stood there for a second, vibrating with rage. Then he snapped. With a guttural roar, he lunged across the table at me, his fist raised, aiming for my face. You ungrateful little rat. I'll kill you. I didn't flinch. I didn't even step back. Years of Aikido training kicked in instinctively. As his fist came toward me, I simply raised my left hand, caught his wrist midair, and twisted it slightly outward. The momentum sent Arthur stumbling sideways. He lost his balance and fell hard against the waiter's station, sending a tray of crystal glasses crashing to the floor. The restaurant went dead silent. Arthur lay there, panting, humiliated, surrounded by broken glass. Emily was sobbing into her hands. I looked down at the man who had tormented me for 3 years, the man who thought he owned me. "You didn't just lose the deal, Arthur," I said, my voice calm and cold. "You lost the only person in this family who was actually trying to save you from yourself." The taxi ride back to our apartment was silent, but it was the kind of silence that screams. Arthur had stayed behind at the restaurant to deal with the police and the management regarding the damages he caused. Emily and I were alone. She refused to look at me, staring out the window as the city lights blurred by, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. When we walked through the door of our apartment, the one I paid the rent for, though she always told her friends her father owned the building, she exploded. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't fall to her knees and beg for a second chance. She threw her purse across the room and turned on me with the ferocity of a cornered animal. "Are you happy now?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You just humiliated my father. You destroyed his company. Do you have any idea what you've done? That deal was our lifeline." I stood in the hallway, calmly loosening my tie. "I didn't destroy anything, Emily. Your father built a house of cards. I just opened a window." "You selfish jerk," she sobbed, pacing the floor. "You think you're so smart because you speak Japanese? Who cares? You're still a nobody, Jack. That's why I did it. That's why I went to Brad." There it was, the truth, stripped of all the polite lies. "So you admit it," I said quietly. "You were sleeping with Brad Sterling." "Yes," she yelled, throwing her hands up. "Yes, I was." "Because he's a winner, Jack. He makes things happen. He flies private. He commands rooms. Look at you. You sit in your home office in sweatpants, writing code for peanuts. I needed a man who could give me the life I deserve, not a husband I have to apologize for." I walked past her into the bedroom and pulled my suitcase out of the closet. I started packing. Not frantically, but methodically. Shirts, pants, laptop. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice suddenly dropping, realizing that her safety net was walking away. "You can't leave. You can't afford another place in the city." I zipped up the suitcase and turned to face her one last time. "That's a funny thing, Emily," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "You never once asked to see my bank statements. You assumed I was broke because I don't buy stupid things. But that peanuts coding job? I bill out at $400 an hour. My savings account has hit 7 figures. I was saving it to buy us a house in the Hamptons, a surprise for our anniversary next month." Her jaw dropped. The color drained from her face faster than it had from her father's. What did you say?" "I'm not the broke one, Emily," I said, grabbing the handle of my bag. "You are, and as of tonight, so is your father. I hope Brad Sterling is generous, because you're going to need him." I walked out the front door and tossed my key on the counter. I didn't look back. They say that karma is a slow burn, but in the world of high-stakes business, it hits like a freight train. It took exactly 2 months for the empire my father-in-law built to crumble into dust. I was sitting in a temporary executive suite in downtown Manhattan, sipping coffee and scrolling through the morning financial news on my tablet. The headline was bold and brutal. "Real estate titan Arthur Vance filed for Chapter 11 amidst SEC probe." It turned out my tip to the SEC had triggered a domino effect. Once the auditors started digging, they found everything. The inflated assets, the hidden debts, the insider trading schemes. The investors panicked. The banks called in their loans. Without Mr. Tanaka's capital injection, Arthur had no liquidity to cover his tracks. He wasn't just broke. He was facing potential jail time. His reputation, which he valued more than his own family, was shredded in the tabloids. But the real plot twist, the one that really made the rounds in our social circle, was what happened to Emily. She had packed her bags at night thinking she was upgrading. She went straight to Brad Sterling's penthouse, expecting to be welcomed as the new queen of New York real estate. She thought she had secured her safety net. She was wrong. I heard the details from a mutual friend. Apparently, Brad didn't even let her pass the doorman. When Emily called him, hysterical, explaining that she had left me and that her father was in trouble, Brad laughed. He told her, "Emily, you were a fun distraction, and you gave me great intel on your dad's company. But I don't date liabilities. And frankly, if you cheat on your husband for me, you cheat on me for the next guy." He blocked her number that night. Emily was left stranded on the sidewalk with her designer luggage and nowhere to go. Her father's assets were frozen, so she couldn't run to Daddy. Her friends, the ones who loved her for the gala invites, stopped returning her text the moment the scandal broke. She had traded a loyal, secretly wealthy husband for a criminal father, and a lover who saw her as a disposable pawn. My phone rang incessantly for weeks. Emily calling, Arthur calling, voicemails pleading, crying, threatening, then begging again. I never picked up. I listened to one voicemail from Emily, where she sounded small and broken, admitting that she had made the biggest mistake of her life, and asking if we could just talk about my startup. I deleted it without finishing. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. The ghost had finally left the haunted house. It's been exactly 1 year since that dinner at Le Bernardin. A lot can change in a year. Today, I walked into the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new headquarters of Ronin Cybersecurity. We just closed a series of funding round for $20 million. The lead investor? Tanaka Industries. Mr. Tanaka didn't just give me his card that night. He gave me a future. He saw a potential where my own family saw a waste of space. We are now partners, and he treats me with the kind of respect Arthur Vance never showed anyone in his life. I was walking to the lobby of a shared office building in Midtown last week, ironically, to look at expanding our office space to a second floor. I was surrounded by my team, wearing a suit that I actually picked out myself. I stopped at the front desk to sign in. The receptionist kept her head down, hurriedly typing on a computer. "Name and company, please," she muttered, looking exhausted. "Jack, Ronin Security." Her hands froze on the keyboard. Slowly, she looked up. It was Emily. She looked different. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting polyester uniform. Her face was drawn, tired, lacking that arrogant shine she used to carry. She was working a minimum-wage desk job, likely the only thing she could get after her father's scandal made the name Vance toxic in the city. For a moment, time stood still. Her eyes widened, filling with tears. She looked at me, then at the expensive watch on my wrist, then at the team of people waiting for my command. She opened her mouth, maybe to say hello, maybe to say sorry, maybe to ask for help. "Jack," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anything. It was like looking at a stranger in an old photograph. I simply nodded, signed a logbook, and handed her back the pen. "Keep the change," I said softly, a call back to the old life she thought I was trapped in. I turned around and walked toward the elevators, my team flanking me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had already won the moment. I stopped trying to prove my worth to people who couldn't afford my attention. Outro. And that is the story of how I lost a wife but found myself. If you are in a situation where you are being undervalued, remember this. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's just you sharpening your sword. Thank you for watching Inspiration Seeker. If this story satisfied your need for justice, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. See you in the next story.